Hello and welcome. My name is Michael Eel, and I will be delivering the sermon for today. The title of the sermon for today is Wisdom. But before we get started, I want to go ahead and open us up in some prayer, and we will go from there. Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for the wisdom that you give us, Lord. I pray that you bless this sermon, use it the way you want it to be used, and thank you for all you do for us. Amen. So, wisdom is having the power to discern and judge properly as to what is true and right. I used to have a pastor that would say, how do you know what is from God and what is from the pizza you ate last night? Basically saying, how do you know what's coming from God? How do you know it's not just your gut feeling, what you think, what you thought? It's not just heartburn, not some crazy random idea that popped into your head. How do you know when it's coming from God? How do you seek out an answer from God? And the way that we learn to discern this and the way that we learn to judge this is based on us having a relationship with God, being in His Word, praying with Him, communicating with Him, asking for advice, talking to other pastors and other leaders like that, and asking them how they would handle a situation, and just really understanding what is biblical and what is coming from God. So the text that we're going to be reading out of today is from James chapter 3. James was written by Jesus' brother, who was the leader of the Jerusalem church around 40 to 45 AD. It was mainly written to Jewish Christians, and a lot of it was focused around poverty and persecution. Through that poverty and persecution, we need to cling to the hope that we have in Jesus Christ. And in this first section that we're going to be reading about is about wisdom from up above in James chapter 3. So go ahead and turn to James chapter 3. And we're going to be reading verses 13 through 16. And then for our first point, we're going to be focusing on mainly just verse 13. Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder in every vile practice. So we're really going to be focusing on verse 13 for our first point. Our first point is going to be that true wisdom is from up above. I'm going to read verse 13 one more time. Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. So James is right here. He's saying in the very first part, verse 13, saying, if you claim to be wise, you claim to be a Christian, claim to be a follower of God, prove it with your life. If you're saying that you're wise and that you're following God, show that you are following God. Show that what your actions are, the way you speak, the way you handle yourself in situations, really is following God. Prove it. And so he's saying, really just stand out in that way. And then in the other part of verse 13, in the meekness of wisdom. So meekness is about a humility, a humbleness. So if you're willing to show yourself or wanting to show yourself that you are a Christ follower and that you're following God and His advice and His wisdom, then what you really need to do is humble yourself to that and submit yourself to that authority and that wisdom that God is giving to us. Now, humbleness is not a weakness. Sometimes in the world we view humbleness as a weakness, that hey, they are submitting to something else. It's not just them that's in control. They're giving authority away. But humbleness is really saying, hey, look, I know there's a higher power. I know what He has for my life is better than what I have for my life. So I'm going to submit to that and I'm going to follow that. So he's saying, prove it with your life and submit it in humbleness. Really follow God. Show that this is who, that you're following that wisdom that is truly up from above. Now, how do we achieve this? If we're lacking wisdom or we don't know what is really coming from God, how do we understand that? How do we discern that? In James 1, verse 5, it says, if any of you are lacking wisdom, ask for it. It's that easy. If you are lacking wisdom, you don't know what to do in a situation, you want it to be biblical, you want to follow God, you want to do the right thing that Christ has for your life, then ask for it. Ask for guidance. Ask for wisdom. Ask for direction. Really lean on Him to provide that for you, and do it with meekness. Do it with humble attitude, saying, okay, God, this may not be the way that I want it to go, but I'm going to submit myself to you because of what you have for my life and what you've done for my life, and that I want to show that I am following you, God. When my wife and I were considering moving to San Antonio from San Diego, it was a quick process. We think within a month and a half we had accepted an offer and moved to San Antonio, and it was quick. And when were trying to figure out whether we were supposed to do it, we had no idea. All of our family, all of our friends, all of our jobs, everything that we knew, the church that I grew up in and was working at, had been here forever. And now we're all of a sudden considering moving to a place we know nothing about, a place where we have no friends, a place we have no family, a place we have no church, a place we have nothing really set up for us other than we know we have a job waiting for us there. And so what we did is we talked to friends, we talked to pastors, we asked for prayer, we seeked out other people's guidance of people who have done this before, where they've left everything they know, moved to a whole new place, and tried to set up shop. Some people thought we were a little crazy because we were well established here in the community. We were set up financially, we owned our own house, we had a little ocean view way out there from our backyard. But what were we doing? Why were we giving everything up to move to Texas? And we just really felt like after the prayer and talking to pastors and other family and friends that this is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to try something new. We've lived in San Diego our whole lives. We've never experienced anything else in our lives other than San Diego. And we really felt like we were supposed to go, that we were supposed to get stretched. We were supposed to grow closer as a family and really grow outside of that bubble and really see what God can do in our lives. So we took that opportunity. And we have now been here for almost 3 years, and it's been a great experience for us. We have grown closer as a family. We have really found a new church and had to go through that whole process of what it looks like to find a church and really know what kind of messages we want to hear about and the kind of style that we appreciate. We had to find new friends. We had no friends coming out here, so we got to kind of start over and really start kind of putting ourselves out there and join community groups and talk to people and really just be open and say this is who we are and really stretch ourselves and make ourselves uncomfortable. And then we just finding new jobs and careers and everything else that's come along with it. But we've really grown because of that, and we've had really great opportunities because of that. But we wouldn't have done that if we just listened to the people that said, you're crazy, you're stuck here, do this, you're fine, you don't really ever need to go anywhere else. You were fine, you were good. But we knew God had something better for us, and so we wanted to take that wisdom from above, not the pizza from our friends, and really understand what God had for our lives, and we are glad that we have done it. And so we're going to move on into our next portion of the sermon, our second point. And our second point is going to be that selfish wisdom produces selfish fruit. So we're going to be reading verses 14 through 16 again, and we'll focus there. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice. When we take our own selfish ambitions, we're going to produce our own selfish results. I want to do this because this is what I want. Well, you got that. Did it affect everybody else? Yes, because it was only all about you. That other people didn't get to see, they didn't get to be a part of anything else, and it's all about you. So you're only going to give yourself a selfish result when you're putting your own selfish intent into something. In my job, my corporate job, we have a saying that is garbage in, garbage out. Whenever we take incorrect data, put the incorrect data in, we're going to get incorrect data out because that it is incorrect from the get-go. So if we're only producing the incorrect selfish desires of the world, we're only going to get the incorrect selfish desires of the world results from there. When we take our own intent, our own ambitions, our own desires for what we want with our lives, we're missing out on what God has for our life because we're filling ourselves up with our own desires, our own things, whereas God has something else. And if he's just trying to get something in your heart, but you have so much stuff in your heart of stuff you just want to do, there's not going to be much room for God to really grow you and really change and really have a really cool life for you that you may never know about. My corporate day job is in finance, where I manage budgets, I create budgets, I work with budgets, I help the company along in that form, and I always thought I had a good grasp on money. I thought I was good at finance, whereas corporate finance is something different than personal finance. When my wife and I got married, I kind of assumed that role as the finance guy managing the budget. And I thought I knew what I was doing. And it came to find out that I don't know what I'm doing in my personal finance world. And so I kept everything to myself, not wanting to disappoint my wife. and she would want something. I say, go ahead, get it. We're fine. Don't even worry about it. Like, we'll pay it off. No worries. We'll get a bonus. We'll get a check. We'll get paid. Like, we'll be okay. Don't worry about it. But it just kind of kept growing. This financial debt problem that we kept having just kind of kept growing to a point where I was no longer communicating with my wife. I was no longer open to her about my struggles, my situations, and it really caused a rift in our marriage and kind of a tension there that didn't need to be there. And so once I let her in and we gave the problem to God, we started seeing results. We started seeing cool things that God was doing in our lives. We would get random checks from random family members for no reason other than, hey, I thought about you and God said to send you money. And we would who knew nobody knew about our financial woes other than my wife and I. People would buy us a meal. People would do something for us out of nowhere, and God was able to really work through that. And so when we took that moment to release it to God, we could breathe. But when I was keeping it to myself, I couldn't breathe because my own selfish intent, my own selfish wisdom was producing this selfish desire within myself, whereas God was really saying, hey, give it to me. I'll take this away from you. You'll be okay. Don't even worry about it. Things will I got you covered. Where it really kind of released that tension from us. Oftentimes, when we rely on our own strengths to get us through certain situations, we fail, we fall. When it comes to money, marriage, life, God has a plan for our life. But if we don't let him to take control of that plan and really let him implement that into our lives, then we'll really never know the freedom of what God could have for our life. So when we moved to San Antonio, it was because we knew God has a plan and a purpose for us, and it was cool. It's been fun. We don't really even know what the full purpose of the plan is, other than we've had some really cool experiences since being out there. But we know that we're moving in the right direction because God has something for us. Sometimes when we take our own selfish ambitions and our own selfish ideas, they may work in the short term. They may be a quick fix. They may work for a moment, but in the long term, they start to fall apart because they're built on these false grounds, these false ambitions, these selfish things that eventually will crumble. Our ambitions, our own desires, they're gonna change. Like when kids are young, they may want to be an astronaut, and then sometimes they grow up as an accountant. So things change over time. Our own selfish ambitions change over time, but God's desire, God's love, God's purpose for our life doesn't change. So if we let that be the root of who we are, then that is what our foundation is going to be built on, and we get to follow that where it won't crumble, where it will continue to work in the long term because of what he has done for us. Our third point that we're going to be talking about is that godly wisdom produces godly fruit. So we're going to be reading verses 17 through 18. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. If wisdom is truly coming from God in our lives, we will see that fruit come to fruition. We will see peace in our lives. We will see all kinds of good things if we just trust in God and let him take care of a situation. We will see that come to fruition because of who God is. God is the same. God holds his word. God is going to take control of things, and we just need to release that control to him. Sometimes in the short term, we're going to run into hardships. We're going to hit bumps. We're going to hit things where we're like, why are you doing this to us, God? Why is this part of my plan? Why is this in my life? What do I need to learn from this? This is not what I signed up for. But we need to continue to run that race to see it all the way through. It's not always going to be pleasant. There's a thing out there called the prosperity gospel where it says, become a Christian, you'll have all the houses, all the cars, all the money, everything you could ever want because you are now a Christian and following God. When in reality, following God takes a lot out of us where we have to submit and say, hey, things aren't always going to go well, but I know who Christ is. I know what he's done in my life. And I know the long-term goal for me is to be complete and be perfect within him. And I need to stay on that course and follow him through the end. And so we need to continue to follow God. And when we take that leap of faith to follow him, we see the fruit come through in our lives. We do see peace. We do see some great results that come out of following God because he's taking that control of our lives and he's doing what he wants. And we get to see and be a part of that. I grew up playing competitive ice hockey, and I thought that was my future. I thought this is what I'm gonna do. And then when I was 17, senior in high school, tore my MCLs in both my knees and couldn't play hockey for about 4 months. And from that, missed a lot of training camps, missed a lot of tryouts, and really just kind of missed the boat to continue on to that next level of hockey. And I was a senior, so I was in talks to go play juniors and do all these cool things with hockey. So I thought, I don't need college. I'm not going to sign up for college because that's not the direction my life is going. So I didn't, and then I got hurt, and I had no colleges. I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. Didn't know what was supposed to happen here. I didn't know how I was going to respond. Um, and so it was tough. I didn't have guidance. I didn't know what to do with my life. I didn't know if I did go to community college, like what would I study? What am I actually interested that isn't hockey? And I didn't know what I was going to do. Proverbs 11:14 says, "Where there is no guidance, a people falls, but in an abundance of counselors, there is safety." So I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. So I started talking to my youth pastor and said, "Hey, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I'm hurt. I can't play hockey anymore. I don't have a college lined up. I don't have a future lined up. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with my life." Um, and from there, it ended up being an opportunity for me to end up working at that same church with my youth pastor, where I ended up staying for 10 years and working there as a youth pastor with them. When I was 17 years old, if you had told me that that's what my life was going to do, I would have told you that that's silly. Like, that's not who I am. I play hockey. This is what I do. But God has a different purpose for my life, and that was to work with junior high and high school kids, teach them who the Lord is, teach them who Jesus is, and really bond with them and really help them see who God is. And with that, I get to show what God did in my life through a situation that was tough for me, that how God took a crazy situation in my life and turned it for the good in there. And so, uh, godly wisdom produced godly fruit. Because I was seeking out wisdom from pastors and praying about what I need to do with my life, it turned into this great opportunity for me with these kids, where I eventually met my wife. Because I got to work with her and do student ministry with her and really got to know her well, and just a lot of really cool outcomes came out of that stint that I got to do, because God had a purpose for my plan that I didn't know was a purpose for my life. And it's not always going to work the way you think it's supposed to work, but God has something lined up for you, and it's cool to see Him take that and really do something with your life. God's wisdom surpasses anything that we can ever come up with. Proverbs 3:5 says that trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. When we step back and let God be God and let God do God, we get to see some crazy things happen in our life. We get to see a lot of peace and burden lifted off of us, and He is going to do something cool with our life. But we don't need to lean on our own understanding, our own wisdom, the worldly wisdom. We need to really rely on what God has for our life, and we need to trust Him with that. And we're going to see some really cool outcomes. King Solomon, the King of Kings, he was one of the richest kings that the Bible has and that we've ever heard about, and he was gifted with one item. If you could have one thing, I will give it to you. Do you want more money? Do you want more whatever? I will give it to you. But King Solomon said that he wants wisdom. He wanted godly wisdom. He wanted to know things. He wanted to act correctly, and he had everything up to that point. And he even says in Ecclesiastes that he compares everything else, or thinks that everything else is meaningless besides his relationship with God. It's stuff. Stuff's gonna pass. Everything's gonna go away, but that relationship that he has with God is not gonna go away. And he wants the wisdom to understand who God is and really be able to follow Him despite having all this stuff. He really just wanted that relationship with who God was. Which is really cool. God created us. He has a purpose for us. He has ideas for our lives. He knows what He wants to use our lives for. But if we're filling ourselves up with too much of our own selfish wisdom, our own desires, our own worldly wisdom, God's wisdom isn't going to come through and transform our lives or help us transform other lives if God is not able to come into our hearts. So that's kind of my challenge for you guys, is really just looking at what God has for our lives, taking a step back and looking at what is coming from God, what is coming from the world, what is coming from our own desires and ambitions, and really kind of learn how to figure out what is coming from God and be able to take that direction and follow it and kind of see what God has for our lives. So I want to close out with prayer, and then we'll go from there. Lord, thank you for what you have done in my life. Lord, thank you for the way that you have led our family. I pray that you just help us to continue to follow your wisdom, Lord, and even do a better job at following your wisdom. I pray that you just bless our time, bless these people, and thank you for all you do.